Welcome in, everybody, to this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're diving deep into creativity and productivity. And to do that, we're going to use as our guide, The War of Art. It's by Steven Pressfield. And we're going to kind of break this down strategically, just like the book itself is. It's structured in 3 parts. First, we define the enemy. Then we learn how to combat it. And then finally, we explore what lies beyond.
A journey from understanding to action and then to transcendence.
Yeah, exactly. And here's something that really hooked me when I first read the book. Robert McKee, if you're familiar with him, the screenwriting guru, he actually claimed that this book was written specifically for him, because he was dealing with some pretty serious procrastination issues.
Yes.
So if you've ever felt that resistance to starting something important, you're in good company.
Yeah, and that's a common struggle that Pressfield calls resistance, that insidious force that prevents us from doing our most important work.
And it can show up in so many areas of life.
Right.
Yeah. We're talking about, that novel you've been putting off writing, or that business idea that you've been too scared to launch. Even, getting in shape or developing a healthy habit, you just can't seem to stick with.
Yeah, anything that requires us to step outside of our comfort zones and grow can be a target for resistance.
And here's the thing that I thought was really interesting. Pressfield says that this resistance, it isn't, some external force. It's not your busy schedule, your family commitments, or even that pile of laundry staring you down. It's something much deeper.
It's internal. It's you standing in your own way.
Whoa, that's kind of a hard pill to swallow, It's like realizing you're your own worst enemy. And to really bring this concept to life, Pressfield uses some pretty vivid analogies. He compares resistance to, like a relentless alien or the Terminator. Even the shark from Jaws, I don't know about you, but those images definitely stuck with me.
Yeah. It definitely paints a clear picture of resistance as a force to be reckoned with, but there's a silver lining to all of this. Pressfield argues that the stronger the resistance you feel, the more likely it is that you're on the right track.
Wait, really? So the things that we struggle with the most might actually be the things we're meant to do.
Exactly. It's like resistance is this twisted compass pointing us toward our true callings, the things that really matter. And he even shares a really powerful anecdote about a woman who's diagnosed with terminal cancer, and she suddenly finds the courage to pursue all the passions that she had put on hold.
Wow. That's heavy stuff. It definitely makes you think about what you might be putting off and what you could be doing if you weren't letting resistance hold you back. So how do we actually combat this inner saboteur?
Well, Pressfield introduces the concept of turning pro.
Okay, but what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
Is it just about, getting paid for your work? Because that's not always possible, especially when you're first starting out.
It's much more than that. It's a fundamental shift in mindset, a way of approaching your work with a level of commitment and dedication that transcends external rewards.
So it's more about how we view ourselves.
Yeah.
And our work.
Exactly. He contrasts the amateur mindset with the professional one. So, for example, an amateur might dabble in their craft when they feel inspired, while a professional shows up consistently day after day, regardless of their mood. They treat their work as a job, even if it's also their passion.
Interesting. So it's about establishing discipline and showing up consistently, even when we don't feel like it.
Precisely. Professionals understand that inspiration often follows action. They don't wait for the muse to strike. They create the conditions for inspiration to occur by showing up and putting in the work.
I can see how that would make a huge difference. But doesn't that sound a little, unromantic? Like, where does the passion fit into all of this?
It's not about extinguishing the passion, but about harnessing it in a way that allows you to be productive. Think of it like a fire. You need both the fuel, which is passion, and the structure, which is discipline, to keep it burning brightly and consistently.
Okay, that makes sense. I like that analogy. But here's something I found a bit jarring. Pressfield compares the artist's journey to that of a Marine. He says that just like the Marines find a strange kind of pride in enduring hardship, artists should embrace the misery of their craft. Is that a little extreme?
He even suggests viewing it as a badge of honor. Remember, he's trying to challenge our preconceived notions about creative work. It's not always glamorous or easy. It often requires us to push ourselves beyond our comfort zones, to face our fears, and to persevere through challenges.
I guess that's true. There's definitely a sense of satisfaction that comes with overcoming those hurdles. But I'm still not sure about the whole misery thing.
He's not saying we should seek out suffering, but rather that we should embrace the challenges that come with pursuing our passions. Remember that anecdote about the woman with terminal cancer? She found a profound sense of purpose and fulfillment in those final months. Precisely because she was no longer afraid to embrace the misery of the creative process, she was willing to face her fears and to pour her heart into her work.
That makes sense. It's about shifting our perspective, seeing challenges as opportunities for growth rather than obstacles to avoid.
Exactly. And sometimes what we perceive as failure can actually be a pivotal point in our development as professionals. Pressfield even shares a personal story about working on the film King Kong Lives. Commercially, the film was a success, but he considered it a personal failure.
Wow, that's surprising. Why?
He felt he had compromised his artistic integrity. For the sake of commercial success, it didn't align with his vision, but this failure ultimately solidified his identity as a professional. It helped him define his values and refine his understanding of what it truly meant to be a professional.
So he learned from it and grew as an artist because of it.
Exactly. It was a turning point that helped him refine his creative compass. And this leads us to another key aspect of turning pro, that Pressfield emphasizes the importance of order and patience.
So like having a dedicated workspace or a set routine.
Yes, it's about creating structure in your external world to reflect the order you seek to create in your work. By minimizing chaos and distractions, you free up mental space for creative thinking. Think about how difficult it is to focus when you're surrounded by clutter or constantly being interrupted.
I can definitely relate to that. Sometimes I feel like I'm fighting a losing battle against distractions.
Professionals understand this and create systems to minimize those distractions. They develop routines, set boundaries, and protect their creative time. They know that inspiration often follows action, and they create the conditions for inspiration to occur.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all ties together. Turning pro is about taking ownership of your creative journey, both internally and externally.
Precisely. It's about shifting your mindset, cultivating discipline, and creating a supportive environment for your work to flourish.
This is already making me rethink my whole approach to creativity. I'm starting to see how those unconscious patterns of resistance have been holding me back.
Awareness is the first step. Once you understand the nature of resistance and how it operates, you can start to develop strategies to overcome it.
And it sounds like turning pro is the key to winning this battle. But before we delve into the specifics of combating resistance, let's take a quick peek into the mystical dimension of creativity that Pressfield explores in Book 3, Beyond Resistance.
Right, where we explore the forces that lie beyond our conscious control.
Sounds intriguing.
He starts talking about concepts like muses and angels.
Hold on. I have to admit, that kind of stuff makes me a little uncomfortable. It's a bit too woo-woo for me.
I understand. But Pressfield acknowledges that these concepts might not resonate with everyone, and he encourages you to interpret them in whatever way feels most comfortable.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
So if angels aren't your thing, you can think of these forces as metaphors for inspiration, intuition, or even just the power of the subconscious mind.
Right, that makes more sense to me.
The key takeaway is that there's a realm of creative potential that lies beyond our everyday awareness, and we can tap into it if we know how.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that.
Pressfield believes that one of the most effective ways to access this realm is through consistent, dedicated work. He even suggests that consistent effort can attract this heavenly aid. He believes that the very act of showing up and putting in the effort signals to the muse, to the universe, to whatever you believe in, that you're serious about your craft.
So it's like we're sending out a signal.
Yeah.
Saying, hey, I'm ready to create something amazing. Send me some inspiration.
Exactly. And he even shares his own personal practice of reciting Homer's invocation of the muse before he starts writing.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I'm definitely curious to try that out.
Whether you believe in muses literally or metaphorically, I think there's something to be said for the power of ritual and intention in setting the stage for creativity.
I'm starting to see how this all connects back to turning pro. It's about taking our work seriously, creating structure and intention, and trusting that inspiration will follow.
Precisely. And that's where things start to get really interesting. Pressfield argues that the very act of creating is a magnet for inspiration.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
He believes that engaging in our craft, regardless of whether we feel inspired or not, sets in motion a chain reaction that attracts more inspiration. It's like we're creating a vortex of energy that pulls in ideas, insights, and even those aha moments.
So you're saying that the more we create, the more inspired we become. That's pretty cool, but how does that actually work?
Pressfield describes it as a kind of feedback loop. The more we put ourselves out there, the more the universe responds in kind.
That makes me think about that quote by William Blake, "Eternity is in love with the creations of time." It's like our creative efforts here on Earth are somehow connected to something much larger.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it suggests that there's a higher realm of pure potential seeking to manifest itself through us, through our creative endeavors.
Wow, that's a powerful thought. It makes me wonder about the significance of my own seemingly small efforts. If eternity is in love with the creations of time, then every act of creation, no matter how small, becomes a way of bringing a little bit of heaven down to earth.
And that's the beauty of this book. It helps us to see our work in a new light, to understand its deeper significance, and to tap into a source of inspiration that's always available to us. But before we get too carried away with the mystical side of things, let's bring it back down to earth and explore some of the practical strategies for combating resistance in Book 2.
Okay, so we've defined the enemy resistance, and we know that turning pro is our best weapon against it. But what does that actually look like in action? How do we implement these principles in our daily lives?
That's where the rubber meets the road. And thankfully, Pressfield provides some incredibly practical advice in Book 2.
So it's not just a bunch of high-level concepts. There's actual actionable stuff we can do.
Absolutely. He lays out specific strategies and tactics for battling resistance and building a sustainable creative practice.
Awesome. Let's dive into those. Where does he suggest we start?
Well, one of the most fundamental principles, and perhaps the most challenging, is showing up every day.
Every single day, even when we're not feeling it.
Especially when you're not feeling it. He emphasizes that professionals don't wait for inspiration to strike. They create a schedule and they stick to it. He even quotes Somerset Maugham, who was asked if he wrote on a schedule or waited for inspiration. Maugham replied, "I write only when inspiration strikes. Fortunately, it strikes every morning at 9 o'clock sharp."
Oh, you've got to love that it's like he's making a date with his muse. But I have to admit, some days it feels impossible to even get out of bed, let alone create something brilliant.
That's where discipline comes in. Pressfield argues that professionals show up no matter what sickness, setbacks, creative blocks. None of these are excuses to skip a day.
So it's about developing that mental toughness, that ability to push through those moments of resistance and just do the work.
Exactly. It's like building a muscle. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. But I want to be clear. He's not advocating for neglecting your health or well-being. It's about recognizing that resistance often disguises itself as fatigue, illness, or lack of motivation.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
We need to be discerning and not push ourselves to the point of burnout. But how do we know the difference between legitimate self-care and giving in to resistance?
It's a good question, and one that requires a fair amount of self-awareness. But generally speaking, if you find yourself consistently making excuses to avoid your work, that's a red flag.
Right. It's like that little voice whispering, maybe tomorrow when you're feeling more inspired.
Exactly. Professionals learn to recognize that voice as resistance, and they choose to show up anyway.
Okay, so we're showing up consistently. What's next?
Pressfield emphasizes the importance of staying on the job all day.
Wait, does that mean we should be glued to our desks for 8 hours straight? I thought taking breaks was important for creativity.
He's not talking about physical endurance. It's about maintaining consistent mental focus throughout the day and avoiding distractions. He compares it to a Marine's approach to duty, constant vigilance, and commitment until the mission is complete.
I see. So it's more about mental stamina than physical endurance?
Exactly. Professionals understand that creative work often requires deep focus and sustained effort over time. Think about it. Have you ever been working on something really in the flow and then gotten sidetracked by a notification, a phone call, or even just your own wandering mind?
Oh yeah, all the time. It's like my focus is constantly being pulled in a million different directions.
And once you lose that focus, it can be incredibly difficult to get back into the flow.
That's so true.
Yeah.
So how do professionals stay focused? What are their secrets?
They develop strategies for minimizing distractions. They might turn off notifications, create a dedicated workspace, or even use techniques like time boxing to structure their day.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. It's about creating a structure that supports our creative work.
Precisely. And it's about recognizing that our minds are like wild horses. They need to be trained and disciplined if we want to harness their creative power.
I love that analogy. So showing up every day, staying focused, and embracing the misery. What else does turning pro involve?
Well, Pressfield argues that professionals commit for the long haul. They aren't driven by short-term gains or instant gratification. They understand that true mastery takes time, effort, and a willingness to persevere through setbacks.
That's something I struggle with for sure. I get all fired up about a new project, but then my enthusiasm fizzles out when I don't see immediate results.
That's resistance at work, trying to convince you that it's all too difficult, that you're not talented enough, or that it's just not worth the effort.
It's like that inner critic is always lurking, ready to pounce at the first sign of trouble.
Exactly, but professionals learn to silence that critic and focus on the long game. They understand that success is often the result of consistent effort over time, not some magical overnight breakthrough.
So it's about trusting the process and being patient.
Precisely. And it's about reframing our definition of success. It's not about achieving some external marker of accomplishment. It's about showing up every day and doing the work.
That's a really powerful perspective shift. It takes the pressure off and allows you to focus on the journey itself.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that setbacks and failures are an inevitable part of that journey. In fact, Pressfield even argues that professionals are willing to embrace failure.
Wait, what? Who wants to fail?
It's not about seeking out failure, but about recognizing that it's an opportunity for growth. And think about it, have you ever learned more from a success or a failure?
Definitely from my failures. Those are the experiences that really force you to reevaluate your approach and learn from your mistakes.
Exactly. And professionals understand that they don't see failure as a reflection of their worth. They see it as a valuable feedback mechanism.
That makes sense. It's about taking the ego out of the equation and focusing on the learning process.
Precisely. And it's about developing that resilience, that ability to bounce back from setbacks and keep moving forward.
Okay, so we're committing for the long haul, embracing failure, and showing up consistently. I'm starting to feel like a warrior already.
That's the spirit. Now, Pressfield also talks about the importance of accepting remuneration for our labor.
So we should always be getting paid for our work.
He's not saying that we should only do work that pays, but when it comes to our professional creative endeavors, accepting payment is an important part of the turning pro mindset.
I see. So it's about valuing our work and recognizing that it has worth both intrinsic and monetary.
Exactly. And it's about contrasting this with the amateur mentality, where people often undervalue their creative output.
Right. It's like we're afraid to ask for what we're worth, or we feel guilty about charging for something we love to do.
And that fear can hold us back from turning our passions into sustainable careers.
That's so true. I've definitely struggled with that in the past.
Pressfield argues that accepting payment for our work is a sign of respect for ourselves and our craft.
I like that it's about owning our expertise and recognizing that we have something valuable to offer.
And it ties back to the idea of turning pro. Professionals see themselves as providing a valuable service, and they're not afraid to be compensated for it.
This is making me rethink my whole approach to creativity. It's not just a hobby, it's a profession.
Exactly, and it deserves to be treated as such.
Okay, so we're valuing our work and getting paid for it. What's the next step in our turning pro journey?
Pressfield emphasizes the importance of not over-identifying with our jobs.
Wait, didn't we just talk about valuing our work and seeing ourselves as professionals? I'm a little confused.
It's about finding a healthy balance. He's saying that while professionals take pride in their work and strive for excellence, they also recognize that their work is not their entire identity.
So it's about having a sense of perspective. We are more than just our jobs, even if we love what we do.
Precisely, and this is where amateurs often get tripped up. They become so invested in their creative pursuits that their entire sense of self-worth becomes wrapped up in their success or failure.
I can see how that would be dangerous. It's like putting all your eggs in one basket. If the project fails, you fail.
And that can lead to all sorts of problems. Fear of failure, creative blocks, burnout, even depression.
So how do we avoid that trap?
By recognizing that our worth as individuals is not solely dependent on our creative output. It's about having other things in our lives that bring us joy and fulfillment, relationships, hobbies, spiritual practices, whatever it might be.
That makes sense. It's about having a well-rounded life, not letting our work consume us.
Exactly. And that detachment can actually be incredibly freeing. It allows us to take risks, experiment, and embrace the unknown without the fear of jeopardizing our entire sense of self.
Okay. I like that it's about giving ourselves permission to play, to explore, and to create without the weight of the world on our shoulders.
Precisely. And that leads us to another crucial aspect of turning pro, mastering our technique.
Right, because you can't build a house without knowing how to use a hammer.
Exactly. And you can't write a novel without understanding the fundamentals of storytelling, or paint a portrait without knowing how to mix colors. Pressfield emphasizes that professionals dedicate themselves to honing their craft, to constantly learning and refining their skills.
So it's not just about talent. It's about hard work and dedication.
Precisely. Talent might give you a head start, but it's mastery of technique that allows you to reach your full potential.
And that mastery often comes from years of practice, study, and mentorship.
Exactly. Professionals are lifelong learners. They're always looking for ways to improve their craft and expand their creative toolkit.
This is starting to feel less like a deep dive and more like a boot camp for the soul.
It's definitely a journey of self-discovery and transformation. But don't worry, it's not all about discipline and hard work. Pressfield also believes that professionals have a sense of humor about their jobs.
Wait, really? I thought being a professional was all about being serious and focused.
It is, but it's also about not taking ourselves too seriously. Professionals understand that there will be setbacks. There will be moments of absurdity, and they don't let those moments derail them. They can laugh at themselves, shake it off, and keep moving forward.
So it's about having a sense of perspective and not letting the little things get us down.
Exactly, and it's about finding joy in the process even when things get challenging.
I like that it makes the whole journey seem a lot more enjoyable.
It should be enjoyable. Creating should be a source of joy and fulfillment, not a constant struggle, but that doesn't mean it's always easy.
Right, it's about embracing the misery as a necessary part of the process.
Exactly. Now, the final principle Pressfield highlights is the importance of receiving praise or blame in the real world.
So we should be seeking out feedback from others.
Yes, he believes that professionals expose their work to the judgment of others, not for the sake of validation, but for the opportunity to learn and grow. They understand that real-world feedback, even if it's critical, is invaluable for honing their craft.
So it's about being open to constructive criticism, even if it stings a little.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that our work is meant to be shared, to be experienced by others. By putting our work out there, we invite feedback, we engage in a dialogue, and we ultimately contribute to something larger than ourselves.
That's a great point. It's about moving beyond our own ego and creating something that has the potential to impact others.
Precisely. And that's what Turning Pro is all about. It's about shifting our mindset, embracing the challenges, and committing ourselves to the journey, no matter where it might lead.
Okay, so we've covered the 10 principles of Turning Pro, but how do these principles translate into actionable steps? What can we do starting today to implement these ideas into our own lives?
That's a great question, and one that Pressfield addresses in the subsequent chapters. He provides specific strategies and techniques for overcoming procrastination, dealing with creative blocks, and building a sustainable creative practice.
Amazing. This is exactly what I was hoping for. Practical advice that I can actually use.
One of the first things Pressfield addresses is the issue of patience, he says. Resistance often uses our own enthusiasm against us by getting us to rush into projects with unrealistic expectations.
Right, we get all fired up and then burn out before we even really get started.
Exactly. He compares this to the amateur athlete who tries to sprint a marathon.
Ouch, not a good strategy.
Not at all. Professionals, on the other hand, understand the importance of pacing themselves.
So it's about setting realistic goals and breaking down large projects into smaller, manageable steps.
Precisely, and it's about cultivating patience, trusting that the process will unfold in its own time.
I think that's a valuable lesson for anyone, not just artists. We live in such a fast-paced world, it's easy to get caught up in the need for instant gratification.
Absolutely, and that's where resistance thrives. It feeds on our impatience and distracts us with shiny objects.
Right, it's like it's constantly whispering, you need to be doing more, achieving more, getting more recognition.
Exactly. So the professional knows how to resist those temptations and stay focused on the long game. They understand that true mastery takes time, effort, and a willingness to embrace the process.
It's about enjoying the journey, not just focusing on the destination.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key aspect of Turning Pro, that Pressfield highlights the importance of order.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that.
Pressfield believes that professionals create order in their external world to reflect the order they seek to create in their work. He even talks about the importance of having a dedicated workspace, a place where you can focus without distractions.
So like minimizing clutter and creating a space that feels conducive to creativity.
Exactly. And it's not just about physical space, it's about mental space as well. Professionals develop routines and systems that help them stay organized and focused. They might meditate, journal, or simply take a few minutes each morning to plan their day.
I can see how that would make a huge difference.
Yeah.
I'm definitely guilty of letting my day run away with me, which often leaves me feeling scattered and overwhelmed.
And that's when resistance has a field day. It thrives on chaos and distraction.
Right. It's like it feeds on our scattered energy.
So professionals understand the importance of creating order and structure in their lives. They know that by minimizing distractions and creating a supportive environment for their work, they're setting themselves up for success.
This is starting to feel like a masterclass in productivity and self-mastery.
It's definitely a holistic approach to creative work. It's not just about mastering our craft, it's about mastering our minds and our lives.
Okay, so we're creating order, pacing ourselves, and committing for the long haul. What else do we need to know about battling resistance?
Well, Pressfield has another interesting point he makes about the mindset of a professional. They view their work as craft, not art.
Wait, what does that even mean? Isn't all creative work a form of art?
He's making a distinction between the mystical dimension of art and the practical aspects of craft. He believes that professionals focus on the latter, on mastering the technical skills and processes of their chosen field.
So it's about focusing on the how rather than the why.
Exactly. He's not saying that art lacks a spiritual dimension, but that dwelling on that too much can be paralyzing.
It's like overthinking it can stifle the creative flow.
Exactly. Professionals focus on honing their craft, trusting that the inspiration will follow.
It's about getting out of our own way and letting the magic happen.
Precisely. And it's about recognizing that creativity is a skill that can be learned and developed just like any other skill.
That's a really empowering perspective. It makes creativity feel much more accessible, less like this elusive, magical thing.
Exactly. It's about demystifying the creative process and empowering anyone to express their unique gifts.
Okay, so we're approaching our work as craft, not art. What's next on our Turning Pro checklist?
Pressfield emphasizes that professionals are not afraid to act.
But isn't action the result of inspiration? Don't we need to feel inspired before we can create something?
He argues that professionals understand that action often precedes inspiration.
So it's like by taking action, we're actually inviting inspiration to show up.
Precisely, he compares this to an actor who's terrified of going on stage. The only way to overcome that fear is to step into the spotlight and act.
I could definitely relate to that. Sometimes the hardest part is just getting started. Once I take that first step, the fear usually starts to dissipate.
Exactly. And professionals understand this dynamic. They don't let fear paralyze them. They act even when they're afraid.
That's a powerful lesson.
Yeah.
It's about not letting fear dictate our actions.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that action creates momentum. The more we act, the more inspired we become, and the more likely we are to achieve our goals.
So it's a positive feedback loop. Action breeds inspiration, which breeds more action, which breeds more inspiration, and so on.
Exactly. It's like a snowball rolling downhill, gathering momentum as it goes.
Okay. I'm starting to get fired up about this. It's like a whole new approach to creativity is opening up before me. What else can you tell me about the Turning Pro mindset?
Well, Pressfield argues that professionals accept no excuses.
Right. No procrastination allowed.
Exactly. Amateurs let the slightest obstacle derail them. They believe in the voice of resistance that tells them they're too tired, too busy, or not feeling inspired enough. Professionals, on the other hand, recognize those excuses for what they are, manifestations of resistance.
So it's about developing that mental discipline, that ability to push through those moments of self-doubt and stay focused on the task at hand.
Precisely. And it's about remembering that resistance is always looking for a way in the moment we give in to an excuse. We're giving resistance a foothold.
It's like we're opening the door and inviting it in for tea.
And we all know how that ends. Pressfield uses a great analogy to illustrate this point. He compares resistance to a telemarketer.
Okay. Curious, how does that work?
He says that resistance is like a telemarketer's constantly calling, trying to sell us on the idea of not doing our work. And just like with telemarketers, if we engage, if we even answer the phone, we're giving them power.
So the key is to just hang up the phone and ignore those calls.
Exactly. Professionals don't even pick up the phone.
Yeah.
They stay focused on their work.
That's a great way to think about it. It's about recognizing those distractions for what they are and refusing to engage.
Precisely. And that brings us to another important principle. Professionals play it as it lays. Meaning they don't get caught up in what should be or what could have been. They deal with the situation at hand with all its imperfections and challenges. They understand that the field is rarely level, but they don't let that stop them.
So it's about adapting to changing circumstances and not getting bogged down by setbacks?
Exactly. Pressfield uses a great anecdote from his own golfing experience to illustrate this point. He was playing in Scotland and hit a terrible shot due to the wind.
Oh, I hate when it happens.
Yeah.
Especially when you're playing on a course as legendary as those in Scotland.
Yeah.
It's like the golf gods themselves are conspiring against you.
Right. But his caddy simply said, well, you've got to play the wind now, don't you? Meaning you can't change the wind. You have to adjust your game.
That's a great metaphor. It's about accepting the things we can't control and focusing on what we can.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that life, like golf, rarely goes according to plan. There will always be unexpected challenges, and it's up to us to adapt and adjust our approach accordingly.
Okay, so we're playing it as it lays, accepting no excuses, and embracing the power of action. I'm starting to feel like I can conquer any obstacle that stands in my way.
That's the Turning Pro mindset in action, but don't let your guard down just yet. There's still more to learn about battling resistance.
I'm ready for whatever comes next. Bring it on.
Yeah.
All right, so we spent a lot of time talking about all of the principles behind Turning Pro, but I'm ready to circle back to that mystical dimension of creativity we touched on a bit earlier. You know, book 3, Beyond resistance is the one I had a little bit of hesitation about.
Yeah, where Pressfield explores those forces
Yeah.
that are beyond our conscious control that can impact our work.
Right. And you said that we don't necessarily have to take it literally, the muses and the angels.
Exactly. We can just think of those as metaphors for intuition, inspiration, or even just the subconscious mind.
All right. Okay, good. I'm glad we clarified that. So how do we actually tap into this realm of creative potential that lies beyond our everyday awareness?
Well, one of the most effective ways, Pressfield argues, is through consistent, dedicated work.
Okay. So I'm sensing a theme here. Showing up seems to be the key to just about everything.
It really is the foundation. And Pressfield suggests that consistent effort can even attract what he calls heavenly aid.
Okay. So it's like we're earning brownie points with the creative forces by showing up every day.
It's more about aligning our actions with our intentions. So by showing up consistently and treating our work with respect, we're signaling to the universe, to our subconscious mind, that we're serious about our craft.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Like we're creating a receptive space for inspiration to flow.
Exactly. And he even shares his own ritual of reciting Homer's invocation of the muse before he sits down to write.
I'm curious about that. I've actually tried it out.
Oh, wow. I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. So, I have to admit, it felt a little awkward at first, like I was just, talking to the air. But, I continued reciting the words and something shifted within me. It was like I was, tapping into this deeper well of creative energy.
That's really cool. It speaks to the power of ritual and intention in setting the stage for creativity.
I think it does. It really does. And it makes me wonder if there are other ways, that we can kind of consciously invite those creative forces into our lives.
Well, Pressfield talks about, paying attention to our intuition, those subtle whispers from our subconscious, and also being open to new experiences, stepping outside of our comfort zones and allowing ourselves to be surprised.
So cultivating a sense of curiosity and wonder.
Exactly. And trusting that if we're following our creative impulses, we'll be guided in the right direction.
Okay. I'm feeling a lot less intimidated by this whole mystical aspect of creativity. It's not about conjuring up spirits or performing elaborate rituals. It's really just about being present, open, and receptive to those creative forces that are already at work within us and all around us.
Beautifully said. And that leads to another fascinating concept, that Pressfield explores the idea that creativity itself is a magnet for inspiration.
Okay. Remind me what you mean by that.
So he believes that the very act of engaging in our craft sets in motion a chain reaction that attracts more inspiration. It's like we're creating this vortex of energy that pulls in ideas, insights, and even synchronicities.
So the more we create, the more inspired we become. It's like a self-perpetuating cycle.
Exactly. And that's why, real artists often have more ideas than they know what to do with, because they've tapped into that flow of inspiration and are constantly being bombarded with new ideas and possibilities.
It's like that William Blake quote again. Eternity is in love with the creations of time. Our creative efforts here on Earth are like, reflections of something much larger, something eternal.
That's a really cool way to put it. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it suggests that there's this higher realm of pure potential that's seeking to manifest itself through us, through our creative endeavors.
Wow. That's powerful. It gives me this whole new perspective on my work. It's not just about me and my little projects. It's about something much bigger, something that transcends my own ego.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of this book. It helps us to see our work in this new light, understand its deeper significance, and tap into a source of inspiration that's always available to us.
Well, it's been an amazing journey exploring these ideas with you. I feel like I have this whole new set of tools and a much deeper understanding of what it means to be a creative person.
I've enjoyed it too. And I hope that, you'll continue to explore these ideas, to find your territory, to turn pro, and to unleash those unique creative gifts on the world.
I definitely will. And for anybody listening, I really encourage you to pick up a copy of The War of Art. Embark on your own creative journey. It might just change your life. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight and keep creating.
Thank you for tuning in to the Power Book of Podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join our growing community. Click the bell icon so you never miss an update. We have so much more inspiring content coming your way.